CMMS Radio talks about all things CMMS, computerized maintenance management software, focused on maintenance management. It's the people, the process, and the culture that make your CMMS journey a success. All right, welcome back to CMMS Radio. We are joined once again by Andy Gager. He is with AMG International, and today we are doing a special episode. Not that they aren't all special when Andy's here, but we're going to talk a little bit about CMMS, and I wanted to put something real special together for my friends over at Engineering Maintenance Solutions, and we're just going to jump right into it. So, Andy, welcome back to CMMS Radio.
Oh, thank you, Greg. It's always a great pleasure to spend some time with you.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate it. And, you know, for everybody out there, it's my opinion that when you're learning from the real pros, you're getting the right kind of guidance. It's really to get you thinking. But these folks, especially Andy, are available to help you out if you want to get in touch with them. So we're going to knock out a quick episode, and this is all about CMMS, really covering a series of topics that we will explore much deeper on later episodes. But Andy, I want to jump straight in here and just ask you, how do you successfully implement and or select a CMMS?
Yeah, so that's always a really good question. So I've been involved in 4 implementations. 3 of them were horrible. One of them was actually pretty good. Actually, I would say very good. But what I would suggest and what I would recommend is there are so many CMMS systems out there that we need to do our homework, understand who the players are in the field, in your specific field, and then start with a list of those companies that you want to evaluate. And I do recommend, keeping that to a short list of maybe 3, maybe 4, okay, different systems that you want to take a look at. Make sure that those systems that you choose fits your processes and your business needs. Because, let's just remember, those CMMS systems are in the business to sell you their software. So they will promise you the world, but we need to understand, can they deliver to what your business needs are? So, one of the things I talk about is, or recommend to clients is, look, we do need to sweat the small stuff. Clearly define, in the contract, when you finally decide which CMMS system you're going to go with, understand, clearly define what the deliverables are in that contract and what their supports are and things like that go along with that. And then understand, prior to doing all that, we need to clean up the garbage that's in every CMMS system that I've ever worked with. So we certainly don't want to migrate, bad data or garbage over to the new system, which, I'll talk about in a couple of minutes, right? So these most successful implementations of CMMS systems that I've been associated with and that I've seen is that we do our due diligence. We define and identify exactly which system we're going to move towards. And then we're going to do the appropriate training, data cleansing, and make sure that it meets our needs.
And then building on that, what, in your view, experience, are common CMMS implementation mistakes, and how could people potentially avoid them?
Yeah. Well, that's what I just said. So transferring the legacy data over, and this is what I see, Greg, and I know you have. There's organizations out there that say, okay, we spent a lot of money into this new system, so let's hurry up and implement it. Let's go live, and then we'll go back and we'll clean up the data afterwards. I've seen 0 organizations do that. So transferring legacy data over to the new system, all that does is just you transfer garbage over into the new system. And now you're expecting that system, to function properly. So we need to clean up the data. Okay. assuming the group will adopt. The other issue is, the implementation mistakes is many organizations just assume that, look, we're going to put you in a room for 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, and now you're going to become a subject matter expert in that system. So where I see organizations drop the ball is that they assume that the group will adapt to the new system immediately. And that's not going to happen. So there is an adoption period, but we have to understand we need to train the user appropriately and then audit that to make sure that they are using the tool for the intention that it's meant to be. And then the other thing that I see as far as mistakes go is we will try to implement a CMMS system, and then we start, when we're getting into the nuts and bolts of the thing and we're trying to look at configuration, I see some organizations change their processes to support the system, particularly with SAP. Okay, that's where I see that most common. But look, that is, in my terms, that's essentially putting the cart before the horse. So the system needs to support your processes versus, you supporting the system. So it's very important that we understand how does the system support our processes and our systems.
That's a really important one, because we've all seen that. We've all seen that where, and the CMMS companies, they may not even realize it because they don't have an awareness. A lot of those individuals at some of these different companies, they haven't been on the plant floors. They haven't done the work. They don't get that. So they might not even realize it when they're working with a client. Well, can we change this and this about what you do? And that's where clients need to kind of arm themselves with this knowledge and understanding. So once we've got our system, and let's say we're doing that, we've got a CMMS that kind of meets our processes, right? There's no real adjustments to how we work. You already mentioned training. And when it comes to training on your new CMMS, right? Because whether you're a first timer or you're replacing one for the third time, you got to do the training. What's your approach to that so that people can be successful?
So, that's a great question, because as I said, I went through 3 really poor implementations and I went through just one really good one. And the reasons that the other 3 were not successful was because the assumption was, if you sit in a room and there's a trainer there standing in front of everybody and showing you all these different, different screens, different transactions. And this is the first time we're seeing this. I mean, this is the first time that we're seeing. I mean, think about this on a personal level. Think about this. The first time that you looked at Microsoft Word or Microsoft Excel, okay, did you get it?
No.
The chances are no, you didn't. And so it's likewise with the new CMMS, which is a lot more, well, I'm not going to say more complicated, but it's the same essence of that as well. So the reason that it was so successful at that one company was because we had a training room set up with workstations, and the trainer came in and did the initial training. So let me go back. So one of the reasons why the other implementations were not successful is because they had trainers that came in, stood in front of the room with the overhead screen up there with the system up there, and he or she was rifling through all these different sessions to say, okay, this is how we create a work order, this is how we create a purchase order, this is how we do all these other things, right? And this is the first time we're seeing this. So me personally, I'd be like, wait a minute, can you show me again how you created a notification? And they're like, yeah, no problem. There you go. And I'm like, wait a minute, can you just slow that down to like warp 9? Because you just rifle through that. I just didn't see the different things that you just did. Yeah. And they're like, yeah, no problem. Boom, right? And they said, you got that? And I felt like, well, quite honestly, I felt like an idiot because I couldn't follow along that quick because they knew the system inside and out. This is the first time that we're seeing things. And so I couldn't even ask. I shouldn't say me, we could not even ask intelligent questions because we didn't know the system. And they assumed that we just followed along. So the successful implementation I went through, the trainer came in, we had workstations, we sat in a room. They went through the different sessions appropriately for, because I was responsible for, or I was a subject matter expert for the maintenance module and the materials management module. So they walked us through, the different steps in those modules. And then what they did was they left us homework assignments. So using the data, using live data in this thing called a sandbox. So every night they downloaded, the transactions. And then the next day we would go in without impacting the live data. We would go in and use dummy data. Some call it the sandbox.
Mm-hmm.
And we would do the same transactions. So we clearly understood. We understood how to do things. And then if we had a question, okay, I believe it was 2 weeks later. 2 weeks later, okay, after this trainer left us homework assignments, we sat down in the room again and we did the same transactions. But when we had a question, now we could actually ask an intelligent question. How did you toggle between this over here and implement? And where did we add materials into this task right here? Or how do we put estimated hours and things like this, right? Because initially we had no idea. We didn't know what we didn't know. So I couldn't really ask the questions. And if I did ask the questions, they just rifled through it too quickly. So initial training, give us some information, give us some homework to do while you're gone, to do the transactions. And then when you come back, let's revisit all the training again. And now we can actually start asking intelligent questions. Does that make sense?
I think it makes sense. And I think a lot of folks know that, but they feel it's almost like they lose awareness of it. So the best trainers around, I'm kind of generalizing, but the best trainers around are going to have a way of they're watching you, they're watching everyone that's going through the training, they're listening, they're seeing behaviors that tell them, oh, they have a gap, they don't know they have this gap. And instead of critiquing the trainers that just rapid fire go through it, it's more like we're not just giving people strategies on how to do better training, and hold your CMMS trainers accountable, but we're also giving a little bit of information to companies out there. If you're a trainer in CMMS, I would say pay close attention to what your individual or groups that you're training are doing as far as those behaviors, and start to get an understanding of what that indicates as far as a gap. Because you said it well, you don't know what you don't know. And everybody's heard that. But what that really means is you're going through learning something new. It's new to you. And it's like riding a bike. One of the most important things that can ever happen when you're learning how to ride a bike is that you actually fall down and get back up and go. Somebody's got to be there to say, oh, that happens. Get back up. Let's go. And maybe that's a simplistic example, but I think what you're talking about here is really good.
Well, hopefully your parents are there to catch you before you hit the ground. But yeah, I understand your point. But
yeah,
and that goes back exactly what I just said. We have to understand that this is something new. This is something new, and that we have to reinforce this. And then, one of the things is very important is that we have to make sure that the people are using the tool properly to capture good data, because people tend to be resistant to change, meaning that, look, here's a new system. I'm used to using Excel spreadsheets. So look, I'm going to do the minimum in the system. I'm going to go back to what I'm more comfortable with,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. That's what people do once they encounter that resistance is they fall back into what's comfortable and um, maybe even no fault of their own, you know? What about on data migration? Do you have any tips when it comes to data migration if someone's going from either, you know, a legacy system into a new, more modern system, or maybe even if they've got a bunch of stuff in Excel files or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
what would you give as far as guidance on CMMS data migration tips?
I'm going to answer that question with a story, Greg.
Okay.
The Not too long ago, well, a number of years ago now, I was working with an organization, and they had migrated over to their third system. Okay, and nobody used it. The system previous to that, they had retired, so you didn't have access to it. So they were reverting back to the third, the original system, the original legacy system.
Mm-hmm.
So now they're on their third. They cut off the second system. These maintenance technicians were going back to the original legacy system to capture data,
Mm-hmm.
or to look up things, right? And the interesting thing about that is why? Why are you doing this? Why are you going back two systems ago? Because at this point, that's what it was.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, well, that's where our information is. And I have to ask the question, why? Right? And they said, because what they did was they transferred all the data, all the information over from the second, right, system over to the new system, and it was useless information. So they're going back, 10 or 12 years, whatever it was, to look up things, look up the PMs or what some of the work was done. So one of the things that I strongly recommend this is you got to clean up the garbage. You got to clean up the data in your system prior to migrating over to that new, because everybody knows this. When we transfer garbage over to the new system, we think the new system is going to solve all these issues. And the reality is, no, it's not. All it's going to do is just keep building on that garbage. Okay. So clean up the data prior to the migration. There are companies out there, if you don't have time, because that's the number one thing I hear, we don't have time. We spent a lot of money on this system, implement it, let's go live. And then after we go live, we're going to clean up the information after that. And I can tell you right now, of the dozens and dozens of clients I've worked with all around the world, not a single one of them have gone back and cleaned up the garbage that's in their system.
Yeah.
So, ideally we want to conduct, some failure analysis like FMEAs, some PM optimization. Let's take a look at our PMs. Are we doing the right PMs? Is the frequency correct? Let's look at our materials management. Let's look at our MRO. Do we have the right materials in there? What about the part descriptions? Because that's one of the biggest issues I see is there is no part description standardization. I've actually worked with many, many clients that are still spitting out PMs on equipment that are no longer actually active within the facility. So these are all things that just clog up your system. And when we do get to that point, Greg, that's when people start thinking that this system is garbage.
Yeah. You nailed it. You nailed it. Oh man, our system sucks. It doesn't work. And it's like, wait a minute.
Yep.
You haven't done the things. And like, well, what do you mean we haven't done the things? You have to set your foundation. If you don't set your foundation, or however you do set your foundation, is how you shall proceed. And when you get to a point and you realize, whoops, we forgot rebar in our foundation. I'm just using that as an example.
Sure.
Well, now your foundation's going to start cracking. And then can you go back and fix it? Sure. But instead, you think your system sucks. I'm going through the system. I'm looking for an asset, and I've got 18 or 22 or 50 different assets that don't even exist anymore. And I'm going through it going, why is all this garbage here, man? This system sucks. System doesn't suck. It's the data. It's a tool. How good is a hammer if instead of, using it properly, you turn it around and try to hammer a nail in with the handle? Can you do it?
Mm-hmm.
Sure, but it's going to suck.
Yeah.
What about the PM planning? Because when you talk about the data migration, and I always think of this is a great opportunity to scrub your data, find out what doesn't matter, find out what doesn't work anymore, fix it up a little bit and roll that in. But preventive maintenance planning is, let's say we've got all that right. And now we're going to get into the PM planning. What do you got for us there?
Well, again, I'm going to go back to prior to us migrating over to a new system.
Mm-hmm.
I want to make sure that the data being migrated over is valid and verified. So when we talk about PM, right, and our PM planning, and I just went through this. I'm going through it right now with another client. I reference it as a reverse fish story. The fish story is, I went out and I caught a fish and it was, this big, right? And the reality was you caught a guppy. So with PMs, it's the reverse of that. All right, this is what the PM started as years ago. But as we experience failure after failure, we keep adding more and more tasks onto that PM. So now, initially 5-10 years ago, we had these tasks that were addressing, failure modes, or recommended from the OEM to do, these inspections primarily. But we experienced a failure. So what's the easiest thing to do? Add a task, add a task, add a task. So eventually what is happening is we're adding all these non-value one-off failures, but we need to add a task to the PM. So, my recommendation is, look, if you're spending all this time on this new CMMS system, if you're spending all this time on training, let's do some of the other due diligence and take a look at, are we doing the right maintenance? And that right maintenance is, let's do a PM optimization. We're going to decompress the current PM on this equipment, and we're going to go line for line, task for task, to say this task is addressing what failure mode or failure modes. And I'm also going to take a look at maybe conducting a failure modes and effects analysis, an FMEA, or an RCM, or a reliability center maintenance activity workshop. And then let's remove the non-value added activities. Let's update the PMs. And by the way, not just update the PMs and the task within the PMs, but are we doing the right frequency? Because right now, one of the clients that I worked with a couple months ago, they're completely off on their frequencies. They're doing time-based PMs on their most critical pieces of equipment versus the recommended OEM's recommendation based on the number of hours of recommendation. So they're woefully over maintaining that equipment, and they're scratching their heads of, why are we experiencing these failures? And what I tried to convince them was, because you're over maintaining. And there is such a thing as over maintaining your equipment. More hands, the old adage, the more cooks in the kitchen spoils the recipe, right? Yeah. Same concept. So let's look at, are we doing the right tasks on the PM? And by the way, is the frequency the correct time frame to conduct those?
Yeah, that's and I think frequencies based on mean time between failures is one of the things you talk about being often overlooked.
We have to capture that. We have to have some type of valid data, okay, which comes from our work order system, by the way. What is our failures? What is the mode? What is the cause of that failure? And we need to have somebody there that's actually using that data for this thing called continuous improvement.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. This is all good stuff.
Well, people, so I'm sorry, Greg, but people misunderstand this. Organizations misunderstand this. And this is the analogy I use. If we have a monthly PM, every single month, every 30 days, we're going out there and conducting this preventive maintenance activity on this equipment. And we're going 12 months, January, February, March, October, November, December, and we are not generating a single corrective maintenance work order. We are over maintaining that equipment. On the flip side of that, if we're conducting that monthly PM and we're generating a corrective maintenance work order every single time we go out every month, we're generating a corrective maintenance work order, our frequency of that is not right. We need to back that off to maybe a weekly PM or bi-monthly PM, okay? If we're going a whole year without generating a corrective maintenance work order, I'm going to recommend back that off to a biannual, okay? Because, again, we're over maintaining that equipment, which has the opportunity to cause more harm to the equipment than any good.
And not to mention that the part of the optimization process when you optimize your PMs is to repurpose that available time elsewhere.
Exactly. So when I conduct a PM optimization workshop, Greg, we will eliminate up to almost 40% of the current PM tasks. Now, because they're adding no value, this is not addressing a failure mode. But on the flip side of that, based on the FMEA or the RCM workshops, we will add another 15 to 20% new tasks that do address known failures. So, when I conduct a failure modes and effects workshop, I prefer doing simplified FMEAs, which means what is the most common failures of this equipment? Let's address those. And sometime down the road, if you do experience another failure that we did not capture in the FMEA, that then is going to segue into this other thing called RCFA. So your root cause failure analysis. Okay, we miss it on the FMEA. We experience another failure. Do we need to make some changes or some edits or add or something? But I don't want to go, I want to keep it simple, right? What are the failures that we've experienced? Let's address those. And sometime down the road, if we have experienced another failure that we did not address, okay, let's have a formal RCA.
Yeah. All good stuff. So I want to cover two more things. One, I want to cover optimizing asset hierarchies, because this is something that a lot of people think they understand, but they may not. They might not realize that they don't. So I just want to get your perspective on, from a CMMS perspective, what is optimizing asset hierarchies and why should people be doing it?
If you ask me the single most important thing that you must have accurate, I'm going to tell you an asset hierarchy. I'm going to tell you an asset registry, asset hierarchy, and equipment bill of materials. And the only way to do that is to get out of your office, get out in the field, and walk down the equipment. So I've worked with many companies right up to this point that are greenfield operations. There is a big difference between design and install. Mm-hmm. And if we're looking at developing our PM strategies or our maintenance strategies based on design, I can tell you right now, you're setting yourself up for failure. So we need to get out there, walk down the equipment, validate what's in the field, and then ping that against what's in your CMMS system to make sure that it matches. So we need to validate what we have. One of the other things I was going to talk about was, not too long ago, again, working with another client, we determined that there were 1,700, I think. I might be a little off on that, but 1,700 current PMs in the system for equipment that was decommissioned years ago. And well, the good side of that was, the PM compliance was 100%. But that's what I'm talking about is, going back to what we're talking about as far as cleaning up the data, cleaning up the system, right? There's no reason why you should be generating those PMs for equipment that has been decommissioned years ago. I mean, I'm talking years ago that it was decommissioned. So when we're looking at asset hierarchies, we must know exactly what is the make, what is the model of that equipment, what's the recommended spare parts list, what is the recommended OEM PM strategies on that. And then as we progress with that equipment, we can refine our strategies on how to maintain or extend, better yet, extend the life of that asset.
Yeah, I would add one more thing when it comes to the not just the implementation, but the ongoing utilization of your CMMS platform or anything similar to it is when an asset that is in that system is being decommissioned, taken offline, it is sold, whatever the case may be, there should in fact be a form of documentation against that, a work order that says, on Friday, you're going to decommission this asset and it's going to go from here to over there. And through that whole process, it should no longer be active, as well as those preventive maintenance items that were in there should go away with it. But I debate whether that's on the function of the solution or the function of the team that's using the solution. But I have seen it numerous times the way you described it, where we're looking at existing data sets from one system to another, and it's got all kinds of stuff that just isn't a thing anymore for 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. It's crazy.
So here's one of the other issues that I see globally. Okay. Some of our equipment is mobile.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll move some of that equipment, but we don't document where that equipment has been moved. So now all of a sudden your asset hierarchy is
wrong,
incorrect.
Yeah.
The other thing that I see is some organizations do not have a formal, what we call MOC process, all right, a management of change. So that's a documentation of what changes have we made to the equipment. And if we don't do that and we don't update the prints, the schematics, the PNIDs, the system still reflects that it's the old system, if you will. But when we need to go and purchase spare parts for that, I've seen where we've actually ordered the wrong parts because that's what was on that equipment or assembly before. But we didn't update, the documentation. That's where, now we start getting parts in here. Now, as soon as we receive them, they're obsolete because we made that change, right? So all of this is linked back to our CMMS. All of this is linked back to our asset hierarchy. Do we have a formal management of change process? All right. Are we documenting and updating, again, the schematics, the PNIDs, right? The functional locations of this equipment. All this is tied into this.
Got one more topic question, if you will, to close this one out. And you answer this any way you want to. This is not about necessarily making a bunch of friends. How is artificial intelligence transforming CMMS platforms?
You know what? To be honest with you, Greg, I haven't played around a lot with AR. There's a lot of talk out there with AI. There's a lot of talk out there about digital twins and how we deal with that. I'll admit I'm not a subject matter expert on that type of stuff. I can see where AI will come in to play with the more sophisticated CMMS systems, whereas now we can use the technology for the machines to tell us that it's not feeling well. And then therefore, and we're at to that point now, by the way. So, we have online monitoring. We can implement some of this AI type of technology in there where that'll give us feedback to say, look, there's something not quite right with this equipment. And therefore, it's going to generate a notification automatically in the CMMS for somebody to go and do an inspection. But as far as that goes, my knowledge of that is pretty limited.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot still to come, and I think there's some good ways people can leverage it. If I was going to put something general on this kind of topic or question, it'd be more like, AI is changing CMMS platforms in that it can potentially help you better leverage your data if in fact it knows how to treat the data, and you're not just letting it run amok and hallucinate or drift, if you will, which is kind of a thing. Howard Penrose and I talked about this a lot when we were recently at Mobius Connect Live in Houston, and we talk about it all the time, and everybody thinks we're being anti. That's not true. We're just being real about it. So I appreciate you taking a shot at that one. And Andy Gager, thank you for once again being with me here on CMMS Radio.
No, Greg, thank you, and CMMS Radio. I appreciate it every single time.
Yeah, and we will see you at Reliable Plant June 2nd through 5th, 2025. We'll get you on stage for a panel discussion.
Yep, looking forward to it. I already got my flights booked and my hotel booked, and I'm looking forward to it.
Nice. We'll see you
there.
Maybe
we should get some Chicago deep dish.
I like it. We'll do it.
All right?
Yep.
All right, man. You take care.
You too. Did you find this episode helpful? Please send us some feedback, suggest a topic, or ask a question. Reach out to CMMS Radio if you need a co-pilot on your CMMS project. Visit CMMSradio.com and use the What's on Your Mind link. Thank you for tuning in to CMMS Radio, your resource for all things CMMS, from selection to implementation, to help you make better choices, learn from industry experts, and have a successful CMMS journey.